waters lies the headquarters of the most sinister villains of all time. The Legion of Doom.
Hi, welcome back to The Brave and the Boys, and today I thought it would be fun to discuss my origin story into the medium of comics. So let's get into it. Now, if you have checked out any of our previous live streams on the channel, you may have heard Jake and I talk about how we got into comics, which check those out, they're really fun. Plus you can hear partial of the backstory, or maybe a little bit more descriptive. This all should be prefaced with the fact that my dad was actually really into comic book collecting back into the early 90s to mid 90s. He had some of the key issues such as Death in the Family, Death Superman, first 6 issues of Spawn, and a bunch more. My dad being into comics definitely helped pave the way to my introduction to the medium. My first exposure was a really obscure Marvel Knights sketchbook that I had just randomly in my room. That sketchbook did have the preview issue of Marvel Knights, although I don't ever remember reading it personally. To me, I saw the cover and I saw characters like Daredevil, the Punisher, Black Panther, which I have an image of right here. Oh my god, is that a horrifying looking cover? I mean, just look how the Punisher is somehow using the penance stare on me. It is horrifying. I don't know how this issue didn't scare me away from comics. Besides that random one-off comic that I had in my room, I did have some action figures as a kid. I had 3 that I can remember. One was Spider-Man, Venom, and Deadpool. Now, these were action figures that were the 12-inch tall ones with the really basic design and really 5 parts of articulation. But hey, I had a Deadpool action figure when I was a kid and I didn't even know who that was. Now, I did love some Spider-Man as a kid. I adored the 90s Spider-Man animated show. If I could play a portion of the Radioactive Spider-Man intro, I definitely would, because that is a banger of a song. And for some reason, I fondly remember liking the Scarlet Spider and Spider-Man 2099 outfit as a kid, though I didn't really know much about either one of those characters. Now, besides being a fan of Spider-Man, one of my favorite shows as a kid was Batman the Animated Show. And my favorite in particular was actually Batman Beyond, the following series. Batman Beyond took place after the events of Batman the Animated Series and continued on the Bat legacy with a new kid, Terry McGinnis, taking up the mantle of Batman. In this series, Bruce Wayne had hung up his cowl due to events that you can see in the first episode if you want to check it out. Bruce steps into the role of Oracle and becomes the mentor to this new Batman. The show follows Terry as he grows into the role and being this type of futuristic caped crusader. My biggest takeaway from this show is that Shui is definitely a thing. Besides that, Terry McGinnis, 100% badass. Now, how could I talk about all this and not discuss some of the movies of the 2000s? First, let's start off with a set of movies I've watched repeatedly. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man series. Spider-Man 1 and 2 I had watched a ton, especially because I had the UMD discs for my PSP, of which I would watch those vacations, road trips, anytime I got the chance basically. I didn't watch a bunch of Spider-Man 3 to the same extent that I watched the first 2, but I do still fondly remember that movie, which I should probably go back and revisit it now as an adult, because that's gonna be an interesting ride. Next up, coming on quite a few years later, we have Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. I actually just revisited the series recently as my movies to watch while on the treadmill, which those are badass movies to watch while on the treadmill. Christopher Nolan definitely brought his A game to this set of movies, seeing how they're still rated as some of the best superhero movies 15 years after the first one had ever released. These films help bring back Batman to the more serious version of himself after the whole Michael Schumacher debacle of Batman and Robin. This actually comes back to my dad, who used to watch movies with me all the time. We would watch anything from Mystery Science Theater 3000 to the James Bond franchise and a bunch more, which luckily the Batman trilogy was part of that lineup. With the mix of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies and the Batman Arkham video games, I fell in love with the character, and I mean, you can kind of tell by my collection back here that it's very Batman heavy. Around the age of 16, I had realized that I had loved things that had spawned out of comic books, but I've never really picked up a comic to read one or even get into them. So one fateful day, while at my local mall, I was walking to Barnes & Noble and stumbled upon their comic book section. I had made the bold decision to purchase Deadpool by Daniel Wade, which I love the Deadpool video games, and that's kind of the reason why I picked up that book. When first opening up to the first page, I did feel a bit lost since there was some dialogue referring to past events in the run. And then I inspected the book and I noticed that I had actually picked up volume 4 of a 4-part series. This led me to doing some research on what had happened in the run previously and what to read next, which sadly looking into it, I couldn't find a 5th volume for this series and it left off on a really big cliffhanger at the end. Well, in this research, it did bring me to this wonderful world of YouTube, and I then started watching videos by people like Comic Explain, Valiant Comics, and my personal favorite, Comic Pop. As I started to grow my collected editions collection with money that I would earn from selling chips at school, I still had not returned to single issues like the one I had found as a kid. Around 2016, at the tail end of the New 52 era of DC, I visited my first ever comic book shop. I went down to my local comic book shop called Quest. There I would start purchasing single issues of comics and I was hooked. In 2018, this random guy transferred into the store that I was working at. I was told that he was transferring from the Glendora location and we'd be working in the same department now. This guy seemed nice enough at first, so we added each other on Instagram, and later on I would post a picture of a new comic that I had bought, which is right here. That comic was the complete collection of Bone by Jeff Smith. That coworker then commented on my post and said, "You should read the black and white one." One spelled with 7 E's. The following day, this struck up more of an in-depth conversation between us that would later grow into a best friendship. And of course, if you've been watching this channel, you know that random guy from Glendora was my one and only co-host, Braveboy Jake. And that's the beauty of comics, or collecting in general. It could change aspects of your life that you would have never known about without them. And that kind of ends my story for now. There was so much that I left out that I would otherwise just keep talking on and on for hours and hours about the video games, some comic books that I started reading as a teenager, as well as like all the movie franchises out there. But now I want to hear from you all. What got you into comics? Was it a friend, a movie? Did a certain cover catch your eye? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't by now and you like this type of content, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, which we have so much more content coming forward. Oh, and actually a final note, yes Jake, it was the black and white edition. Of course I would go with the original style of Bone. Alright everyone, keep reading and stay bold.